What's up, YouTube? So today I wanted to do an in-depth talk about the deck that I created, the basically GRIXIS historic control list, or what I like to call dark control. Basically, I had a few requests from some people to kind of explain some of the more unique card choices in the deck, and maybe some of my thought process in building this deck. So I just thought I'd take the time to do a quick video kind of detailing some of the things that I look for when building a deck and why I chose those cards for this deck. So as I had mentioned in my previous video, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out, the deck tech video where I played some games with the deck and I talked about some of the more major choices. But yeah, basically the first thing I had to think about when making the deck is what is the historic metagame like currently. And I had played some other decks before this one, and I realized that currently in Historic there's a few different branching decks out there, right? There's aggro, there's combo, and there's control. And typically the aggro was, in my opinion, about 60% of the field, or maybe even a little bit higher, 65%, something like that. And then we see control maybe about 20%, and combo a little bit less than that, maybe 15%. Yeah, I guess if you include Greasefang in there, yeah, maybe it's a little bit higher than that. But the majority of the field in Historic, from what I was playing before, was aggro based, and so I wanted to make a deck that was good against aggro, that would win pretty much every game against aggro, but still had a shot against the combo decks and still had a shot against the control decks. And my preferred deck of choice, of course, is control. I'm a big control mage, so I was looking into different colors like Dimir or Esper, stuff like that. But when I was looking at Esper, basically it seemed like U-White was kind of just the superior color of control for that. And I've always been a fan of BOLAS, so I wanted to see if there was some way I could make a cool BOLAS deck that worked in the meta. And personally, BOLAS is a strong card, right? It's if we look at the BOLAS the Ravager, it's 4 mana for 4/4 flyer, and it makes the opponent discard a card. And then even in the late game, it has a viability because you can turn it into the Planeswalker. So just a really solid card, almost always a 2-for-1. Yeah, all around good card, even in Historic. And then the Dragon God has always been a really good card as well, almost as good as Teferi 5, or maybe even better in some instances. But the main drawbacks to BOLAS Dragon God are its cost, right? It's got the triple black, so it's pretty hard to cast it. The other issues with it are, like, it doesn't have a good way to draw and defend itself in the same turn. So a lot of times you'll have to destroy something, then it will be at 1 loyalty, and you'll get killed off by like a shock or something like that, or a little bitty hasty creature or something like that. So you really have to have the board really stable, and maybe even have open some mana to remove a creature if you want to play your Dragon God. And so because of that, I had to build a deck that could handle the board and also have cheap removal so that I could defend my Planeswalkers or my BOLAS Ravager, stuff like that. And so that's why I went for a lot of these fatal pushes and unholy heats. I started off with like a 2-2, and well, before this deck, before I switched to GRIXIS, I was trying some Dimir, like I said, and I just had the fatal pushes, and I always had trouble with some of the matchups when I had just the fatal pushes. Like, for example, Elves was surprisingly a really hard matchup for the Dimir control deck that I was trying to play, because you could never kill the Elf Lords with your fatal pushes unless you got your land sack off or something. So that's why I added in the Unholy Heats, because it's 2 damage and it can eventually become 4 damage later in the game. and the 4 damage can hit creatures or planeswalkers, which makes it also pretty good against control, UI control. Yeah, so that's the benefit of that. But as I've been playing a lot with this deck, the times that I hit a planeswalker with this card are not that many, just because aggro is so prevalent in the meta. There is some UI, but it's just not as common. And even when you do, like Tef 5, if they get a Tef 5 down and they plus it, it's at 5 loyalty, so this is not killing that anyway. So it's more useful for like finishing off a planeswalker that's already low than it is for killing it. So yeah, it's not super reliable, and it doesn't do that good of a job against the other creatures in Historic, but against certain matchups like Elves, or even in Wizards, it helps a lot in Wizards to have the extra 2 removal spells, because you can kill like the I don't know why I want to say Pyromancer, but it's like a 1/2 creature that has prowess. I'm trying to blank on the name, but anyway, yeah, it's good in Wizards matchups, it's good in the Elves matchup, and it's pretty good in mono red as well. Yeah, I guess those 3 mainly. And those are some of the most prevalent decks I've seen. And then Fatal Push is just good in pretty much every matchup, except for sometimes it can brick against Elves because I can't activate Revolt. But yeah, having the 6 is pretty important. And another reason I can't wait for Dominaria United to come out, because we'll have the Cut Down card. I can replace a Holy Heat for Cut Down, and basically this deck should never lose to aggro at that point if you have Cut Down and Fatal Push. So yeah, and the first versions of this deck I didn't have Cling to Dust, but I really struggled with combo decks. Like I was winning a lot of my control decks and matchups and a lot of the aggro games, but the combo decks were beating me almost all the time. So I tried to think of what cards I could add that would not hurt my control matchup too much, but would increase my matchup against combo, and so I decided with the 2 Cling to Dusts. Basically, you want to just hold that in your hand when they go for the Grease Fang, or they go for Mizzix's Mastery, something like that. Then that's when you cast the Cling and you get rid of their combo piece, and basically make them waste some spell. That's how you beat the combo decks with Cling. And the other card that's pretty important is Drown in the Loch. So a lot of these combo decks are milling themselves, so they're filling up their graveyard, and then your Drown gets turned on, and you can counter anything that they cast and kill whatever creature they bring to the board. So yeah, that's pretty key in that matchup too. It's also important in control, but it's a little bit harder to use effectively unless you get a lot of discard. So I think getting kind of an early Croxa in the control matchup is the most important, because yeah, it'll activate your Drowns faster, and also it's a recursive threat that they have to deal with more than once typically. Alright, keep going down the list still. We've got Eliminate and Molten Impact. Eliminate, again, for the 3 mana, 3 CMC creatures were just pretty hard to kill with these 1 mana spells, so brought in Eliminate to help deal with that. Specifically, I think Angels I was having the most trouble with Angels of any of the aggro decks, so this Eliminate is kind of teched for that matchup. It also kills the 3 mana Elves Planeswalker. It kills Narset. So yeah, it's just pretty good in most matchups. And Molten Impact can often be kind of like a 2-for-1. You kill 2, deal 2 damage to kill something, and then you cast another draw spell or something and kill something else. And it can't be countered. So if there's like a mono blue deck, you can kind of get around the can't be countered stuff because of that. So pretty sweet. Those are all pretty sweet removals that work well. The Tainted Indulgence, mainly to cycle a little bit. You draw some cards, you drop off your Croxa, or you drop off maybe removal. If you're in a control matchup, you'll drop your Fatal Pushes, stuff like that. Sweltering Sun, it's good in against aggro, pretty key against aggro, so you're trying to draw for Sweltering Sun. And if it's not an aggro matchup, then you're going to be cycling those Sweltering Suns. Try to get rid of them, fill your graveyard for your Croxa, stuff like that. Other cards that are kind of unique in the deck, the Compulsive Research. So this one, I just wanted a little bit more draw, and this card is not played very often, but it's pretty good in control decks if you think about it, because it draws you 3 cards and then you have to just discard 1 land. And control decks, you know, you're running like 26 or 27 lands a lot of times, so typically you already have more lands than you need when you're just drawing through your deck or just drawing naturally. So it makes sense. It's getting you 3 good cards, getting rid of one of the cards you don't really need in your hand, and this deck kind of tops off at 5 anyway, so you don't need a whole lot more than 5 lands anyway. So yeah, I just added it, tested it out. It's been good, no problem so far, so I've been liking it. Divide by 0, when you're in best of 1, it's nice to have kind of these silver bullets. So Divide by 0 kind of helps fix some of the things your deck's missing. Especially this Exile non-permanent, sometimes you just need it to get rid of something that's hard to get rid of. Or create some blockers, stuff like that. So yeah, it's been good. Honestly, it's been really good. It's been surprising me a lot how good it is still, even though it's been altered by alchemy, but it's still pretty strong. You know, it's good against control, good against most of the creature decks too, to be honest. It can get you some life gain, help you stabilize, stuff like that, so really nice to have that. Then Kolaghan's Command, that's another reason I really wanted to go into Grixis, was for Kolaghan's Command. So this card is almost always a 2-for-1, because you kill some aggro creature and then you make them discard, and so you've even slowed the aggro down even more because you got rid of their bigger cards that they were going to play next turn. Sometimes in the matchups you'll bring back Croxa, you'll bring back BOLAS to your hand, or Kalidas. So yeah, that can be good too. Like maybe I'll play a Kalidas on turn 4 and they'll spend like 1 or 2 cards to kill it, and so they can't further their own board. They're just getting rid of my Kalidas, and then the next turn I make them discard and I get my Kalidas back. So it's like a double whammy. They just wasted all their spells. So yeah, it's really solid. A very important part. So this and the BOLAS are like the big 2-for-1s in the deck. Really solid cards. And Chandra, good removal. If it sticks, it can be really good. I mean, the ultimate wins you the game if you ever get to it, which happens sometimes, but not super common. It can also help you cast your BOLAS sometimes if you're struggling to get your 5th land. You can play this and then get to the BOLAS with the extra 2 mana, so, or even cast one of these other spells. Yeah, so just kind of a nice well-rounded card. Honestly, not that crucial. If you wanted to cut something, like you could maybe cut the Chandra for something else, but it's a good card. Not a game-winning card most of the time, but good card. And then yeah, and then we got Turgid. I picked Turgid because, again, I mentioned in a previous video, but I wanted to make the control matchup better. And one thing that blue-white is not super great at getting rid of is artifacts. Like one of the only ways they can get rid of it is Teferi can tuck it at -3 and put it back in your deck, and then try to counter it later. So if you can get this down, you can kind of force them to discard cards, lose life, sacrifice their planeswalkers, stuff like that. So it definitely makes the matchup much nicer in your favor because they're having to worry about this all the time. And then the body side is pretty good against aggro. That's the other upside, is you have a giant 4/5 body with menace. So typically the aggro decks can't really kill 5 toughness. But yeah, that's just solid, and you can bring it back. Since the front side is targeted, you can bring it back with the Kolaghan's Command. So that's nice. And then Dark Intimation. So why did I pick this card in the deck? Honestly, when I build a GRIXIS deck, or even a lot of control decks in general, you're trying to find cards that are getting you like 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s, sometimes even 4-for-1s, because early in the game you're losing a lot of value by just trading 1-for-1 with removals and stuff like that, and then sometimes you even have to use your removal spells a little bit inefficiently in the early game, whereas like the creature cards of recent times are just generating so much value and constantly, they're a constant threat because they're always doing damage. So you kind of need to make it up by getting 2 or 3-for-1s on your other spells. So yeah, that's kind of what sweepers do, right? Because you play a sweeper and you make up for all the creatures they've played and damage they've done by killing 2 or 3 of their creatures and winning that card advantage war, basically. So same thing for Dark Intimations. When I was looking at the different cards that kind of give me that value, that 2 or 3-for-1 value, I found this card, and the more I looked at it and thought about how it's synergized with the rest of the deck, the more I thought, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Seems like it would be kind of the perfect fit. Also thinking about the matchups in Historic and what was going on in those. Like early game, they have a bunch of cheap creatures that are like 1 or 2 CMC, and then a lot of times they'll drop like 1 really big 3 CMC creature or Planeswalker, or a 4 CMC creature, something like that. So typically I can kill almost everything with Sweltering Suns, and then they'll have like 1 big creature left in their hand, or that they just played, or something like that. So it was kind of just kind of a perfect like synergy to go from sweeping the board and then into killing their biggest creature, making them discard maybe their second biggest creature in their hand, getting me back my Ravager, my Kroxa, or Turgid, or Kalidas, or something, or even one of my Planeswalkers, and then drawing a card also. So I think just about every game I play this card, it's a 3-for-1, and sometimes it's a 4-for-1. That's like the super good situations. And then it does have the upside where it gives your BOLAS an extra loyalty counter. I don't know if I've really had that matter. Maybe 1 game, but almost never. So that's just, I guess, icing on the cake. It doesn't really affect anything. But yeah, just that 4-for-1 can be kind of the game breaker, because like mono red matchup, you'll kill all the early stuff with your sweeper, your spot removals. They'll play like maybe they'll play like Aeneas on turn 4, and in their hand they have a Torbrand or something like that, or an Embercleave, and you play the Dark Intimations, they sack their Aeneas, and they lose their Torbrand or their Embercleave because they've already spent all their first few turns dropping all their little bitty creatures to try to make a board presence. Yeah, so it just works super well with the deck. Maybe it could even have more of these in the deck. Yeah, maybe you could replace the Chandra with it or something. I'm not sure, but it's nice to have like these unique silver bullet cards people won't expect that can kind of turn the game in your favor. And this one definitely can do that. I think Divide by Zero sometimes can do that. People don't think you have a counter spell up, and then you basically have a counter spell and you get some card value. Compulsive Research, this is more just for finding your sweepers, drawing 3 cards, trying to find your sweepers, stuff like that. So that's kind of the story of the deck. you got your cycling lands, so you can try to find your answers better, or in control matchups, draw into something useful, stuff like that. Yeah, that's most of the deck. This sideboard here, these are just some other creatures I was looking at to replace maybe Targrid or something like that. Trying to decide what's the best one. Kefnet could work. Maybe Reservoir Kraken, not sure. It's definitely good against aggro, but not sure about control. Phoenix, Cavalier of Gales, maybe the Alchemy, Tybalt, Enter the God Eternals, Commence the Endgame, Lockmere Serpent, or Scarab God. I always like Scarab God, but it's a little bit slow, so it's hard to say if that's good enough or not. But yeah, that's kind of the ideas behind the deck. We'll have to see what Dominaria United brings. We'll have to see if the meta shifts. I'm hoping Greasefang gets banned at some point, because that's kind of like the only matchup that is hard to win. Most of the other combo decks you can win. As long as you've got one Drawn in the Lock or one Cling, you can win it. Most of the control matchups, it's like a 50-50 to win. Maybe there's favor in your hand and your side, especially if you have Croxa, but yeah, about 50-50. And then aggro decks, I think you're 80% to win. Like, they just feel so easy, so easy to win. So we'll see how it shapes up, but that's kind of the idea. And I'm sure I'll be making a lot more of these decks in the future, so I'll have to go into some depth of my choices for those other decks. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. Maybe you played with the deck. What were your thoughts after trying the deck out? See what you think, and maybe there's room for improvement. You know, never stop improving if you can. So cool. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and until next time, see ya.